Book. Movie. Game.
Are you for real?
Absolutely.
Hi, hello. This is Jen with glasses, and this is
Russ, the husband.
and this is Book, Movie, Game. This is the podcast where my husband and I talk about a book, a movie, and a game. Sometimes it's things we've read together, not at the same time. Sometimes it's things we watch together, definitely at the same time, or maybe not, and it's games. But sometimes it's things that we've sort of done separately and we're describing to each other. So this is a little bit of a review show, but it's a little bit of a recommend show. So here's the deal. There's going to be spoilers. Sorry. So if you don't like spoilers on particular things, look at the description in the podcast. And if you're like, I want to watch that first, then please do. So we're going to start off, because it says book, movie, game, with book.
Sounds like a good place to start.
Let's start with Russ.
Okay. I just read a book recently by Patricia Marks called Let's Be Less Stupid, an attempt to maintain my mental faculties. Not facilities, faculties.
Do you have facilities in your brain, Russ?
I don't know. I haven't checked recently. But Patricia goes by Patty. She's currently a writer for The New Yorker. She also was a writer for SNL for a while.
When did she write for SNL, Russ?
I don't really know. I'm not sure which era she wrote for. I don't think she was on for very long, but...
Oh, okay. So it's sort of like something you put on your resume when you're like, I wrote for them, but maybe it was like...
Exactly.
It could be like 2 shows. Okay.
It's a big resume booster.
Or it could be like 10 seasons, and then we just sound dumb because we don't know who
Absolutely.
she is.
I didn't check in that part because she's such a captivating writer, it didn't matter.
Okay. Good.
So it's listed as a humor book, and it is quite funny. There's a lot of anecdotes, and there's a lot of little fun brain puzzles and stuff to do that, which really are not brain puzzles at all. Like, for instance, there was a crossword puzzle where every answer was the word yes, which was kind of funny. But what's great about this is it was a funny book, but at the same time, you found yourself kind of like learning on accident. So what this whole book is about is she went in and she did an IQ test, and then she got an MRI and a brain scan. And then she did all this crazy stuff, dietary things and what have you.
Like what? Like what diets did she do?
Well, she did like green tea supplements and took all these different kinds of supplements called Focus and Mind Factor and all these different kind of things. She had a strict diet and she had a strict exercise program. And then she did a lot of new things purposefully to kind of try to see if she could get her IQ level up over a 4-month period.
So basically she just tried all the quackery and all the science to see if
she tried all of it that wasn't harmful or weird. Basically everything she could afford and was natural, she did.
So she's a writer for The New Yorker, so it's not like she's a dum-dum to begin with.
No, she's quite intelligent. And
so what did you like this? Obviously you like this book if you're bringing it to Book, Movie, Game, but...
It was really... No, actually, I'm only going to talk about movies, books I actually absolutely hated.
You're only going to talk about movies that have been turned into books.
I'm going to talk about... Exactly. I'm going to talk about movies that were turned into books and books that I never finished. But this book was really engaging, and the fun part about it was that she did all this stuff for 4 months, and then at the end of the book... the whole point is that her IQ level actually dropped by 2 points.
You're spoiling it! You're not supposed to give the ending! You're not supposed to give the ending! There are some spoilers, but
there was a spoiler alert, so I just thought everything's on the table.
No! You're not supposed to summarize the book. You're supposed to talk about, like, a particular part you liked, and we'll discuss it. You're not supposed to drop the ending bomb.
So...
Otherwise, why buy the book? The end.
That's it. Don't buy the book. I just told you about it. So the funny part, too, is that with the brain scan, like, parts of her brain actually grew larger, which sounds really great until you realize other parts of her brain got smaller.
I want to hear about one of the specific things she did that was crazy and why it was funny.
She didn't really go into detail about all that.
She didn't
kind of
do
stuff.
that? She didn't say, like, what the green tea supplements did to her, or, like, if she did the crazy brain exercises to make her eyes go cross-eyed? Were there any bad side effects of anything?
Well, she had a lot of headaches, she said, just from doing all the brain work, because she usually gives her brain a pretty good rest every day. But other than that, probably some diarrhea in there. But other than that, she didn't really go into that. She really went for more of the jokes and stuff, and just sort of like, in the beginning she talked about what she did, then there's a bunch of brain stuff, and a bunch of tests that were just like funny tests. And then at the end, she talked about what the results were.
Okay,
that's what makes it a humor book, though, and not a neuroscience book.
There you go. So you would recommend this book because it's entertaining, and her writing style is entertaining.
Absolutely, it was really.
Do you think I would like this book?
No. Because you enjoy facts so much. I think most of the time, instead of going for the fact, she went for the joke, which I think you would not be comfortable with. I don't know.
Sorry, I had to get up and pick up our cat from stepping all over our keyboard and messing up our recording equipment. That's Bob. Say hi to Bob. Okay, that's interesting. I think it's funny that you think I wouldn't like it. I don't know. I do like to know the specifics. Like, I would want to know, to me, that's one of the most interesting things. Like, I would want to know how much green tea she was taking every day. I'd want to know, like, what the exercises were. I'd want to know, like, how they made her feel. But if you're telling it, so that's why you're saying I wouldn't like it, because she doesn't go into
It's a 120-page humor book. You know, it's something to keep in the bathroom. You can still read it in a week. You know?
Yeah, that's why my mom, by the way, that's why my mom says that she hates library books. I said, why do you hate library books? Libraries are amazing. She's like, you don't know what those people have done with those books. You don't know where they've taken them. You don't know whether they've washed their hands. And it should have made me paranoid, but I still get library books all the time.
You heard it here first. Sanitize your library books every time you check them out.
I do feel bad if I'm drinking something when I read a library book and I spill something on it, because I'm like, oh, that's going to be mysterious stain later. That's going to be gross. Someone else will be wondering what that is. And it's mostly tea, guys. Nothing gross. All right. So my book, the one I want to talk about is The Aeronauts Windlass by Jim Butcher. And it's part of the Cinders series. And let me just talk to you about science fiction briefly and my relationship to it, which is I really like science fiction and fantasy a lot. But most of the time, I do not like talking to other people who like science fiction and fantasy. It comes from the fact that I don't like to over-explain things. Like, I don't like it when someone's over-explaining things to me. And I feel like when you discuss with someone who's a real aficionado, I said that word wrong, but we're just going to keep on going, that they feel the need to, like, over-explain, like, each little bit of world building that the author has done, which I find aggravating. Also, there's a sort of idea that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, that you want that to be a part of every piece of your life. And some people do, and that's awesome. Like, some people like to cosplay, some people like to go to conventions, some people like to, you know, get some of Leonard Nimoy's spit. Like, I get all this is like a thing, but for me, that's not my thing. My thing is, these are books that are an escape. As in, I read these books because they're fun and they're completely divorced from my real life. So I really don't want to have a conversation over dinner about like with let's say take Harry Potter, like dissecting, you know, Crookshanks the cat. Like, what was he? Like, I don't like to do that kind of stuff. I like thorough world building, but I'm mostly concerned about character and if this feels, I don't want to say plausible because it's science fiction and fantasy, but if this feels interesting to me. And then, especially when I read my science fiction and fantasy books, and I'm also a memoir junkie, I'm also a novel junkie, like I'm also like a nonfiction junkie in a lot of ways. So I'm basically just a huge reader. Like, especially with some of these books, like, to me, especially science fiction and fantasy, depending on the author, some of these books are just like candy, which means like I just gobble them down in like a week or a couple of days, and then I just feel great, and then I don't need to, like, go back and dissect it. So that's I don't know if it's a warning. It's not really a warning. It's just, like, that's how I feel about it. I don't like to necessarily talk about it with other people, not because I don't enjoy the book, but because you just get bogged down in all these details, this world-building stuff, and I don't necessarily like to do that. Like, I just like to enjoy the book and move on, I guess. I don't know. That's me. I tend to find when you get grouped, I don't like to get grouped in any kind of group in a lot of ways. So I don't like to be grouped. Like, I don't necessarily self-identify as like a geek or a nerd, although I am those things, because I don't like to feel like I'm in just one group. I just like to hang out with everybody. So that's the way I was in high school, and that's the way I am now.
It's true. She has no Harry Potter wands or costumes anywhere. I've seen all her stuff. It's not to be seen. But
I enjoy seeing other people's stuff on the internet sometimes, like other people's Harry Potter wands. That's fine with me. But don't ask me to make one with you as like a bonding experience, because I'm not into that.
Wait, didn't Jim Butcher write this book just so he could sell his line of steampunk merchandise? No?
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay.
As far as I know. Gosh, could I bring up something crazy? Now people are going to be arguing in the comments about this. So anyway, and also I'm very particular with authors. Like, sometimes I only like one series of the book. So I read Jim Butcher's oh gosh, why am I blanking out on his regulars? He has two different series prior to this. One is the Fury series, which I actually do not like, and I don't read just because I don't like the omnipresent tense. The other one is about Harry Dresden, the Dresden series, which he's kind of like
the Dresden Files.
Yeah, it's basically like a mashup of urban fantasy and noir, where it's like he's a detective. And anyway, so I like that series a lot too, if you guys want to check that out. So this is the first book in a new series of his called the Cinders series, and I was hesitant to read it because I didn't like the Fury series, just my personal taste, not that they weren't well written, but also like I enjoy steampunk, but I feel like it's like I don't enjoy things when I get too much of things. It's like I'm not the type of person to eat a bowl full of donuts.
I am,
but I'm
sure.
not, but I like to mix it up. It's not that I wouldn't eat the calorie content of a bowl full of donuts, but it has to be different things, and that's how I feel about my books. And so with steampunk, when anything gets too popular and you see it everywhere, like vampires, steampunk, I think is, I get a little bit like I don't want to. I'm full. Like I don't need any more. So I was really nervous about reading it because I'm like, oh, the Aeronauts, Windlass. I'm like, okay, like what is it going to be? But I love this book, and I read it like candy. I read it in like 2 days. It was so fun to me. I really enjoyed the characters in there. He does a lot of stuff. There's a lot of lady characters in there I could identify with, but you don't always need that. But it was really fun to have that. It's the first book in a series, and I'm really excited for the second one now. And Jim Butcher does kind of do this with me, where I read a book, and I'm like, oh, when's the next book? And I have to wait a year. So he just wrote this one. But if you enjoy a lot of like character banter, if you enjoy well-developed female characters, and this book is not, if you're looking for a book that's going to blow your mind in a way where you're like, you can't even look at the world the same the next day, where it's like a book you spend a month reading and you're like, half the time with the book you're like, I don't know if I can keep reading this. Like, that's not this kind of book. This kind of book is the kind of book that, you just want something that's just so fun and doesn't ruin the fun by being stupid. And sometimes when you read a fun book, it ruins the fun by being stupid. And this book does not do that. It's just really enjoyable and a fun time. So I loved it. I read it in like 2 days. It's really fun.
Which is impressive because it's about as big as the M Encyclopedia.
Yeah, it's big, but it's easy read. So, it sucks you in. It's the kind of book that you're cooking dinner and you'll be like sneaking over because there's 5 minutes on the timer and you're going to read, until the timer goes off in between, making something else. So it's that kind of book. And I really loved it a lot.
I can always tell when there's a book you enjoy because you can blow through a 500-page book in 2 days.
Yeah, I just love it so much.
If it's a book you don't enjoy, it takes you 2 weeks to read a 100-page book.
There's books you take like medicine and you read because you're supposed to read them, and I don't like reading those books too often, but sometimes you do. And there's books you read that take a long time because they're so dense with thought. Like every page is a lot of not just information, but just a lot of I don't even say, it's not even about vocabulary, but there's some books that you read that you can't rush through. It won't let you. It's like walking through a swamp, but not necessarily in a bad way. But it's just kind of like you have to absorb every page. And sometimes when I read nonfiction books, I feel this way because of information. There's so much information per page. I have to come back and read that page. I need to make sure I've absorbed it. But some books are just a slow book. I think like Werner Ving writes a lot of books like that where I really enjoy them. But because there's so much on each page and you really have to understand the world, that it takes me a while to read those books. It takes me a long time to read those books. So Jim Butcher's not like that for me. I often read them almost too fast, and sometimes I miss subpoints of plots, and I have to go back, not reread, but like, oh yeah, that was significant, because you're just trying to get, like, it's so heart-poundingly fast for me. You're just trying to get to, like, you have to get through the crisis point, because you care about the characters so much, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna burn to death, like, that kind of stuff, and you're trying to get rushed to get to the point where you don't feel like your heart's gonna pound out of your chest. So that's more like what's going on with there. So it's a candy book, but it's a really good candy book, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was just very interesting to me. He did a lot of very interesting things with space and the dimensions, and I'm not even going to get into everybody in there, which probably is a mistake. I don't know. But I'm not going to profile the characters. But just when you open up and read it, it's very interesting. And I just really enjoyed it. And sometimes, I don't know, like, it feels like sometimes in adventure books, there's certain characters, they're stock characters. And I think he takes those characters and twists them up a little bit. And I like that too. There's a lot of really interesting things that I enjoyed very much. So they are not Windlass by Jim Butcher. It's the first of the Cinders series is what it says. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Sounds great. Shall we move on to movies?
Sure, let's move on to movies.
Let's move on to movies then.
Now, this is one Russ and I have watched together.
Yeah. I am not a person who can read a 500-page science fiction book. I like my science fiction in movie form, and my book's not about science fiction. I love Star Wars, but I can't read Star Wars books, so there's my little thing, my idiosyncrasy. So, movie, though, we watched together. We watched this great documentary, actually, about the Back to the Future series called Back in Time by Jason Aaron. It just came out, actually, October 21st, 2015, which happens to be the date that is in Back to the Future 2, where all that super cool, groovy stuff is happening.
And hopefully you've seen the Back to the Future series, and if you're some old person or some young person, ridiculously young person, and you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's really great.
If not, then pause it and catch up, watch the trilogy.
I know, and then come back.
Come back 7 hours later, and then we'll talk about it.
You'll understand why there's a documentary about it. I think the original trilogy, like me seeing that movie for the first time as a kid was just mind-blowing. Like, oh, and it was so fun. And I really enjoyed watching this documentary about it. And they talked to the stars, but they also talked to a lot of different people. They talked to Adam F. Goldberg, which I enjoyed. I enjoy his show, The Goldbergs, anyway, because it's about my childhood. Overcamped, but a lot of this stuff, I'm like, I did that, I had that, I thought that, which I think is really interesting. So, it's good to see Michael J. Fox. I was really interested in a lot of this stuff. Like, I didn't actually know, even though I should have known. So, in the first movie, and if you haven't watched this, well, just listen. In the first movie, who plays the dad in the first movie?
Crispin Glover plays in the first movie.
And he gives this really kind of interesting and strange performance that really kind of, at the time, you're like, this guy's a little bit off. But it kind of draws you in because you understand why he has so many social problems in the movie. You're like, he's just not quite there. Like, everything's a little bit off about him. And I love that character. And he comes back in the second movie, or I thought he comes back, but I didn't realize until I watched this documentary that he did not play the dad in the second movie. They actually took a prosthetic from a
face mold, yeah.
From his face mold, and because he's supposed to be so much older in the second movie, they just slapped it on a different actor. And that's so weird, and I don't understand why they did that, and I'm sad about it, because I didn't know. This is the kind of stuff you find out in this, and plus there's a lot of fandom stuff in there which I really like.
Yeah, I actually just watched an interview with Crispin Glover about that, and basically what he said is he had some issues with the script in the first movie, and ultimately he wasn't satisfied at the end, and they kind of just mutually split ways. But then when they used his face on another actor, that's when he had a huge problem with it. He actually took Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale to court over it and actually won. Because what they did is, so if you've seen the Back to the Future movies, or if you haven't seen them, in the second movie, they're basically retracing timelines. So they go back to 1955, but then with new characters, and then, so there's multiple characters. So they use part of Crispin Glover's performance from the first movie in the second movie, and then there's really a really small and insignificant part with the new actor. But basically his lawsuit came down to, you can't use my face, put it on a different actor, and people are going to think it's me. And I wasn't happy with the performance that guy gave. So yeah, that was his beef.
Well, he's sort of there's certain actors that are very, I don't know what the word, but they're very concerned about the craft, and sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way. And I'm not saying which way he is, but they're very, very specific about how their performances are, and they're very, very specific about doing the job that they want to do. And sometimes it makes them difficult to work with. Sometimes it doesn't. I guess it depends. I mean, ask people that worked, I guess, with Johnny Depp, because he can be that way too. So it's interesting to me that they replaced him. I just thought that was kind of crazy.
As a viewer, I think, and as a kid, I mean, we didn't really notice it, but I think as a viewer, it's such an insignificant and small part. The father plays such a small role in the future that I just think that it doesn't really matter as far as the whole point of the story.
And just to clarify, too, like, what the movies are about. The first movie's about a kid that goes back in time and his mom falls in love with him. It's very creepy a little bit. Like, you don't really think about...
It's a little bit weird.
The incest plot line. I mean, nothing really happens in some extent, although it makes you really nervous that something's going to happen. And he basically messes up his life because his parents don't get together because he shows up on the scene and his mom falls in love with him. So, basically, the first movie's about that. The second movie is about going to the future from 1985, and so on and so forth. And there's hijinks and shih tzu. But I actually really liked the dad from the first movie, Crispin Glover. I really wish I could have seen more of him in the other movies because I enjoyed him. His performance felt a little bit just sort of like, and I don't know if I guess I'm recommending the Back to the Future series and not the documentary, but I am recommending the documentary too. But his performance seems really like dangerous. That's why I said in the documentary, obviously there's bad blood there, so he didn't do any interviews about the movies, but I wish they had because I always thought his performance was a little bit dangerous. Like, it felt like edgy in a way that was just really interesting. I really liked in the documentary, I really liked Leah Thompson's interviews. I thought she was really funny. I thought she was really funny. She said something that made me laugh a lot, which is like, she's like, everyone's like, you're Miss Wholesome actor, but she's like, my first major part was like a mom trying to have sex with her son. She's like, incest is pretty edgy, people.
True.
So I thought that was interesting too.
Well, you know who else was in the first movie and that wasn't in the second movie? It was Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer, Marty's girlfriend.
That always bothered me as a kid. Like, when
that one was an obvious switch out.
Yeah, when we went to the second movie, that she wasn't. First of all, that they kind of knocked her out because they didn't know what to do with her. I'm like, give her something interesting to do. Number one. Number two, like, they switch out the actresses, and it was so obvious that they did it. I feel a little cheated.
Yeah, and she Claudia Wells and Crispin Glover sort of have opposite performances because in the first movie, Crispin Glover's character is really a large part of the story, whereas the Jennifer character, really, it's only a couple of scenes because she doesn't go to 1955 with the rest of them. But in the second movie, it's a more significant part. So it's just interesting.
They knock her out. I mean, they said in the documentary, which I thought was interesting, that they knocked her out because they didn't know what to do with her. Because they said at the end of the first movie, and kind of at the end of the first movie, I don't think they were planning on doing any more movies. It was sort of...
in fact, that to be continued kind of scroll there at the bottom that you see now on DVDs, the original VHS one that came out, that was the first time it appeared. In the theaters, it didn't say to be continued. They never intended to make a second one, but the first one was so hugely popular that they decided to then.
So basically, if you really like finding out what's behind the scenes and all the interesting stuff, like, it was really interesting for me to find out how the script finally got made and what they had to do. And like, it's so weird to think about how things affect projects. Like, it was at this one studio, but then was it Pepsi or Coke?
I believe it was Coke originally.
Coke bought out this movie studio, and they changed the whole flavor of Coke.
Coke.
They changed the whole. Ooh, new Coke. They changed. That is an old reference, guys. If you want to look about the new Coke controversy, you can have fun with that. But basically, they changed a lot of the flavor of the movies coming out, and they didn't want to do it. And then they tried to shop the script around, which is hilarious, because this is the funniest thing about this, because this is a family movie, and this is the thing about family movies in the 80s. Some of them are really like, how is this a family movie? When you really think about it. But they shopped around the studios, they're like, this is too nice, this is too clean cut, take it to Disney. And they took it to Disney, and Disney's like, no, Disney does not do movies about potential incest. And I was like, oh, okay.
Disney shall remain incest-free.
Yeah, they're not going to do a movie about wacky possible incest. So.
Well, the funny thing about Coca-Cola being involved at a certain point is, if you remember right, in the movies, actually Pepsi is the product that they use. So it's kind of funny how they got switched out. I wonder if that was kind of a
No, Coke did buy it. It wasn't Pepsi, right? So it was kind of maybe it was a little bit of a slam.
Yeah, a little slam to Coke.
Because they didn't end up at that studio. Anyway, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff when you talk to the writer. There's a lot of people, a lot of heartwarming stories about people building their own DeLoreans, which I always loved that car. Like, when I'm sad DeLoreans didn't make it. It's almost like they should have made it after the movie, but it's too long. Basically, all the kids that watched the movie, by the time they turned 16, that's the car they wanted to buy. In their hearts. If they had seen one for sale, they would have bought it. But that's, I guess, too long a gap. Like, I don't think the parents that went to the movie with their kids were that interested in that car.
Well, at that time, too, the DMC, DeLorean Motor Company, had already done making cars. So they were already using old cars for the movie as it was.
Oh, there you go. So. I'm sad.
That's a sad story, DeLorean, yeah. super cool looking cars.
So in the documentary, there's lots of stories of people that make their own DeLoreans. There's DeLorean clubs, which I find interesting. I always find the human element of, and I enjoy, like, again, like, I don't like pigeonholing myself into one fandom. I really, and sometimes too, it's hard for me. I like the original thing, but I don't necessarily like all the derivatives of a thing. And it feels like if you say, like, you're a Star Wars fan, then people want you to like all the animated series. They want you to like all of the books. They want you to like everything. And I can't commit to that. I just can't commit. I can barely commit to wearing a t-shirt that has a fandom on it because I just feel like, oh, I don't want to have to explain what I like and what I don't like, and then I understand that certain things about this blah, blah, blah are problematic. So I'm non-committal about that. But I really enjoy watching other people being enthusiastic, and there's a lot of people in here that are very enthusiastic about Back to the Future and DeLoreans in particular, and, you know, who care about this kind of stuff, who care about it. I really like, they interviewed Adam F. Goldberg, and they also interviewed Dan Harmon
of Community fame,
talking about problematic person. But I like Dan Harmon, but he is very problematic in some ways. Everyone is, because we're all human beings, and that's what the internet needs to realize, is like everybody's problematic because we're all a problem. I thought it was really interesting. There's a lot of funny stories shared about that. I did not realize Dan Harmon worked with Robert
Zemeckis, yeah.
Robert Zemeckis. He worked with him at one time, so that's funny too. So there's all kinds of things, and I don't want to spoil those, but it's really, if you like finding out like what's behind the curtain, you know, who's the guy behind the curtain running the show, it's really interesting to see, and just a lot of fun stuff, and a lot of things. Like, I'll tell you one incident from my personal life. So when the Back to the Future movie came out, I actually watched it in the advent of the video cassette tape. And for
VHS,
for you young people, you have to understand, my parents were early adopters of the VCR. Not the earliest.
Oh, did you have a top loader?
No.
Oh, those are the best.
That's why I'm not saying we weren't the earliest, but we were early adopters of the VCR. And you have to understand, when video rental, like, changed the game. Because it used to be, if it wasn't on TV or in a movie theater, you didn't get to watch it. So I watched Back to the Future on VHS. But when I was a young person, the second and third movies were coming out, and one of the things they did was they showed this documentary on TV about the making of the first movie. And I watched this thing, and I was like, oh, I can't wait. And they also gave out these really cool glasses at Burger King, which probably are worth some money. Where's my round glasses with the shades on them?
Oh, I remember those. Those were cool.
Yeah, that's the one I got when I went to Burger King.
Awesome.
So there's a line where Robert Zemeckis makes this joke, and I was convinced of this, and my brother was like, no, this is stupid. But he said, where they basically, in the second movie, they have these hoverboards, right? These anti-grav hoverboards, all right?
Skateboards without wheels, basically.
Yeah, they float. And Robert Zemeckis makes this joke, and you have to understand, when you hear this as like a 10-year-old, you latch onto this like this is...
Pre-internet, so you couldn't check this out.
You couldn't fact check it. And then no one was... Basically, he says, like, oh, they manufactured these, but parents groups wouldn't let them sell them because they're so dangerous. And I was like, what? And I really thought that was true. Obviously, he was just making a joke. They don't have... I mean, today, they're just barely getting into anti-gravity technology. But they didn't have that. But I was convinced of that for a while, and I made an idiot out of myself because of it. And that is actually mentioned in the documentary, just about, you know, like, as a kid, you're just told, like, whatever, you know, whatever he says must be the truth. He's saying it with a serious face, not understanding.
Yeah, I think Adam F. Goldberg did a good job highlighting that whole hoverboard incident in the episode of The Goldbergs, where the character Adam actually tells his friends he has a hoverboard, and then he has to like make a video to try to cover up his lie, and it gets crazier and crazier. But that's how it was though back in the day. You know, you say, I saw this thing about hoverboards, and your friend doesn't say, no, that's not. They say, no way, and you know, but there's no way to actually fact check it. No internet.
Yeah,
you know?
Now you could probably search engine it and be like, okay, oh, that's just a joke. That's not true. You know what I mean? Like, ooh.
Yeah, it was a super fun documentary. There are a lot of just neat personal stories and just different things, and just too much stuff that we can even talk about here. But go check it out. Called Back in Time, again, by Jason Aaron. It's on Netflix and other streaming media places where you can get streaming media. So let's move to game. Today we're going to talk about a couple video games. Sometimes we may talk about board games and just anything that can be considered a game. Today we're going to talk about video games. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. And just you know, my handle is Jen with Glasses, and I do stream on Twitch. Which, if you don't know what Twitch is, that's fine. A lot of people don't. Twitch is basically where people watch other people play games, which sounds not so fun, but it is fun, and it's fun for me. It reminds me a lot of like when I was a kid, and my friend Sarah and I would scrunch up together at her dad's computer desk and play a game together. So I usually I play retro games, and if you want to look me up on Twitch, that's my handle, Jen with Glasses. I also put my videos up on YouTube, so, you know.
Also Jen with Glasses on YouTube? Also
Jen with Glasses on YouTube. So basically, I play a lot of, I really enjoyed as a kid, and I enjoy as an adult. I find it's kind of a cross between a puzzle game and RPG, and it's called a point and click. And basically, if you're familiar with King's Quest, a lot of people play King's Quest, the old version. You know, probably congruent to being now would be like Life is Strange, which is a new game that's out now that's about time travel and all kinds of different things. But basically, it's where you solve puzzles through talking to different characters, through finding objects, that kind of thing. So recently, I've just finished playing through this. I played through Gobliiins. And Gobliiins was recommended to me. I never played this as a kid. It's one of those things where now as an adult, I'm like, we didn't have search engines, guys. Like, my parents didn't buy very many computer games, and I didn't know how to, like, look up what were similar computer games. Like, what's similar? And you couldn't really trust it. I mean, you had to plunk down a pretty big hunk of cash, and you could talk to the person at the computer store, but probably they wouldn't be able to give you a good idea. I'm like, I didn't know a lot of these games existed. So Gobliiins is a game, it basically was released by Sierra in the United States, where Sierra is one of my favorite gaming companies. They did King's Quest, they did Space Quest, they did Police Quest, did a lot of quest games. They sort of have a tongue-in-cheek mentality, which I really liked as a kid. Gobliiins was made by Cocatel Vision, which is a French company. You can tell when you play the game, just the illustrations, the way they are, it just feels French in a way that French animation is. I don't know if you guys watch any kind of kids animation now, but there's a lot of things coming out of French studios, and they have this look, this Gobliiins look. And Gobliiins, by the way, is spelled with 3 I's because you have 3 goblins.
Oh, how cute. So
the animation is really on point and cute. It came out in 1991. Cocatel was basically bought by Sierra Online in 1993, and that's when they released the games in the US, I believe. They might have released them before that and just licensed the games, but I only played the first. There's 4 in the series. The first 3 were like back to back to back, and the 4th one was released in 2009, which is, wow.
That's a big gap.
That's a big gap. So you have to understand the limitation of these games, and how you would get this game now is you'd buy it off of GOG, and they would have they already have it set up so you can play on your modern computer. And also I found out you can play it on Android apps.
Oh, sweet.
Which is really cool. You get all 3 games for like, I don't know, $3 on there. So the thing I love this game and I hate this game. This game almost broke me because the way it's a puzzle game with light RPG elements, which means you don't do a whole lot of talking to other people. You don't get to free wander around a map. It basically shows you a screen. On that screen is everything you need to solve the puzzle to get to the next screen. So some of the puzzles, I don't like puzzles that are too easy, and I don't like puzzles that sort of feel like it's cheating. Like if it's so off the wall, you're like, I would never find that out unless I looked it up through a walkthrough online. Like, how would you even know that? And Gobliiins for me is borderline that. So I really enjoyed, you have 3 goblins, and they can each do only certain things. So the first goblin is probably the most useful goblin, but also, and probably the smartest goblin. And basically his job is he can pick things up and use them. And that's what he can do. So if there's an item on the screen, like if there's a key, you would have to use him, make him walk over, he makes a little sound as he walks, and he would have to pick something up, and then you have to decide how he can use it. The second guy is, and they have names, but who cares? I call this, I don't call them.
Their functions are more important than
their
names.
Their functions are important names. So the other guy I call Magic User, and he basically just does this little like spell thing, like choop, like does this little spell thing, and he can turn things into other things. Sometimes he can pull things closer to you. It's a little bit unclear. The game does do a good job of teaching you what they can do, because in the beginning you just think he can just turn things into other things, like random things into other things. But then as the game goes on, it does teach you, like, sometimes he can use his magic to pull things closer to you and manipulate things a little bit, and that's kind of his job. The third guy is the punch kicker. And basically what he can do is punch things and climb things. So he's helpful. He can climb ropes, which the rest of them can't. And he can also punch things, which is helpful. But none of these things are as helpful as they seem. Because number one, they're very limited. Like when you're using the magic user, you can only use the magic spell. And it's actually difficult to get the guy to line up. So he uses the magic spell on the correct thing. So that's limiting. The other limiting thing is you share a life bar. So anytime you do something that's not correct, your life goes down. And that's one of the things that I'm told later they fix in later games, because it's frustrating not to be able to try some of these silly things. You have to try a lot of different things because some of these puzzles are very nonsensical. The other thing I want to talk about with the game, other than the illustrations, are completely adorable. And when you do something wrong, the goblins all make faces and like interact with you, like breaking that kind of third wall, which I love. But the other thing I want to talk about is the fact that it's not a save system, it is a code system. And I hate that. Because here's what happens. Some of these puzzles, especially in the game, are relatively easy. Like, move this over here, move that over there. Oh, look, now you can open this and walk through there, if you can picture that. But later on, like, you have to do a series of sometimes up to like 20 different things on a screen. And you have to do them without dying. So it's like, okay, I need to get this object. I need to put this object over here. Now I need to use the magic user on it and to change it into something else. Then I need to pick it back up again. Then I need to use it over here. Then I need to take punch kicker and have him punch kick this. Okay, now I need to do this. So it's like a series of 20 things. And so you get to the point where you're like, okay, I know steps 1 through 18. I can't figure out what to do at 19 because it's not clear. And some of these puzzles are not clear. Well, what happens is if you die before completing step 19, when you enter that code again, you have to redo those 18 steps again. And that kills me every time. Because you're so... And then you get tired and you start messing up step 7 because you're just tired. You're like, why? So that is another frustrating aspect of this game. This game is... But overall, I think it's still a really fun game. I think it's a good piece of gaming history. Like sometimes... We've lost it. There's games that I think, especially in the 2000s. Let me just drop my owl mug and make a lot of noise. But I think, especially in the 2000s, in some ways games got bigger, but in some ways they got a lot smaller. I think when the first-person shooter became kind of the king of games, and I am terrible at first-person shooters, by the way. Russ can tell you, I scream and run and hide. I hate it. Like, it's too much stress, and I'm not good enough at lining things up. You know, there's a lot of games that kind of went by the wayside. I'm excited to see some newer games come out, like Life is Strange, games that are more just story-based, which I enjoy, and also puzzle-based, which I also enjoy. But Gobliiins is especially a way to get a good kind of history lesson, especially if you played it as a kid. Like, there's a lot of reviews online from the time that say things like, the illustrations are going to appeal to children, but the puzzles are actually so hard, they're more meant for adults. But there's a lot of kids that were my age. I didn't play it. That played it and got so frustrated they quit, but they still love it anyway. And so there's a lot of nostalgia there, but also it is a fun game, and it bends your brain. I
actually thought the opposite. I'm looking at this as a consumer. As I watch you, first of all, the more frustrated you get, the more fun it is, and the more I laugh because it's just hilarious. I can tell you're ready to throw the computer out the window, and I'm just like, this is great. Secondly, it's like that first guy, the item picker upper, otherwise known as the guy that does all the work. Mostly those other two guys' job is to get in his way so he cannot pick up any items. That's mostly. So half the time you're moving guys out of the way so that you can do the thing that you're supposed to do. And the other thing is I thought actually completely opposite what you said about adults. I thought this game was made for kids who are doing such random stuff that it just works. Because these puzzles, like if it makes sense, usually is not the answer to the puzzle. Oh no, you're supposed to push this bone in the ground and that's it. And there's also a lot of useless things that you don't need as well, which really, and again, every time you mess up an item or you mess up the way something's done or you punch the wrong thing, boom, you're starting all over again. I can see it's very frustrating. But again, for watching you, I think it's great fun. They're just really fun games to be involved with.
Well, I think definitely frustration. One of the reasons why you'd want to watch someone play this game or play this game yourself is like the victories and defeats are so extreme. Like you feel so excited when you solve a puzzle. It's like you just want to do a dance. And when you fail, you get so upset. You just want to to burn the machine. And there's no physical discs anymore. Like, everything's just downloadable, and you download it, pay the $4 to GOG and download it. But you just feel like there's physically something you want to break to just tell the game how mad you are about it. So it's Gobliiins with 3 eyes. It's really fun. If you want a little bit of nostalgia, or if this is before your time, just to kind of see where games were. And for the time, like, it's amazing. The graphics are very amazing. For 1991, it looks really good. All right. So, Russ, what are you going to recommend to us today?
I'm going to recommend a game that my wonderful dear wife here, while she was on a vacation up north with some family, she went to a little shop that had just a bunch of old stuff, and she got me, in the case with the booklet, Altered Beast for the Sega Genesis. Now, this game came out in 1989.
And I would just like to say, not to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt, the fact that Russ has talked to me a lot about retro games. He was a big Nintendo person and a big arcade person. And so I had this floating in the back of my mind. And this is why, even though your loved one may not always enjoy every single game you enjoy, it's always nice to talk to them about it. Because when I saw that Altered Beast case, I just remember Russ saying, I wish I had Altered Beast. It was like, and I go, Altered Beast, Altered Beast, Altered Beast. And then I was like, I know I should buy this game. So I'm happy.
Well, first let's talk about consoles for a second, which is I've never owned a Sega Genesis. When I was a kid, I had a Nintendo, and that's kind of what I stuck with until I upgraded to Super Nintendo. So I actually played Altered Beast the first time and only time before this, actually, in the arcade. This game absolutely rocked my world. Now what I play is a Retron 3, which allows you to play Nintendo games, Super Nintendo games, and Sega Genesis games. Super cool system. And what I really like about the Retron 3 is that you can plug in original joysticks. So I'm using my original 1985 Nintendo controllers and my 1989 Sega controllers. You can plug them right into the Retron 3, which makes it a really nice playable system. And they're also, if you've broken or lost controllers, they're making some repo controllers that you can buy at various places that are pretty decent as well. So let's talk about Altered Beast. This game came out in 1989.
No, it came out in... And why do you love this game so much? Like, what's the history with you in this game?
Well, this game rocked my world. Because, first of all, if you think about 1989, I mean, Mario 3 had just come out the year before. The stuff that Nintendo was putting out in late 80s, early 90s, it was good stuff. Like, Kirby came out early 90s. But still, when Sega came out, the difference in the graphics, again, you're talking a 16-bit system with the Sega versus an 8-bit system with Nintendo. And it just absolutely kicked the butt of all the graphics of anything Nintendo was doing. It was just, even though it's not really 3D, it made it look like it was 3D, and it was just amazing. The reason I liked Altered Beast so much is because of the fact that it sort of has a dark Greek mythology kind of thing going on. It's not a game you would say, oh, that game's for little kids. It sort of looks...
Well, this is the funny thing. When he plugged it in and you start putting on, the first thing it says to you as the player is what?
Rise from your grave. I actually have the book here. I actually want to read the first page of this book just because it's so good. It's so well written, and it's really fun. And I didn't know any of this backstory when I played it, but it says, it is the time of gods and myths and legends, when men were warriors and courageously fought unnatural enemies in the endless battle of good against evil. It is the time of the Altered Beast. Summoned by Zeus, god of thunder, you have been awakened from the dead to challenge the wicked Neph, god of the underworld, for the fate of Athena. That sounds important. And Athena is no ordinary girl, told you. She is the daughter of Zeus and must take her rightful place among the gods if only you can free her from her place of imprisonment. Although you are once a brave and awesome Roman centurion, the rigors of this journey demand a supernatural display of strength, and so you are bestowed with the powers of the Altered Beast. Let's see how many times they can say Altered Beast in these couple paragraphs. The power to transform your being into a part animal, part human, a formidable force, in case you didn't know what Altered Beast meant. But to achieve this rare form of vitality, you must earn it by conquering foes and capturing spirit balls. No comment. You'll muster the energy to transmute from one beast to another, and each time you do, you will advance one round closer to the realm of the underworld, where Neph awaits the final confrontation. It's not dramatic enough, really, but it sets a good backdrop for the story.
So one thing I noticed when you were playing this game is just the fact that you get very frustrated because you only get, like, how many lives do you get? It's not very many.
Well, even if you can go into a menu. I mean, the basic is 3 lives. You can go into the menu and give yourself 5 lives, and there's also a life bar for each life. So if you can imagine, so you have like 3 little blue dots.
It's not like Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario where you can earn more lives. Like, you basically get them. Once you have those lives, that's it.
As far as I'm aware, I haven't found a way yet, and I haven't looked it up because I'm just trying to kind of figure it out on my own. But you can go in there and adjust how big your life bar is. So even making it, 5 blue dots before you die and 5 lives. Going through, and there's these 5 pretty decent sized levels. And each level, what you have to do is you have to get these spirit balls, and you have to get 3 of them to turn into each beast. So each level is a different beast as well. But if you don't get all 3 spirit balls right away, what happens is Neff comes out and he sort of does this weird like electricity thing against you, and sort of, I guess, is checking if you're supernatural enough to fight the boss. And if you're not, then you have to play further in the level. So the longer it takes you to get these spirit balls, they just basically, it could be an endless level if you don't get spirit balls. And it's a super hard game not to get hit and not to die.
And you played this game originally in the arcade with your brother.
Yeah, I only ever played it in the arcade. I didn't have a Sega Genesis, and neither did any of my friends growing up.
So how many quarters did you waste in this game?
I wasted rolls of quarters on this game. The game was so hard, but I thought it was so cool. And I never made it past the second level. I had turned into a dragon a couple of times on the second level, but I never made it to the boss even.
So basically there's points where you transform into the altered beast. Mm-hmm. You have to hit those points. There's lots of different, like when I see you play this game, I see you enjoying this game, but I also see your level of frustration. Like, you've never what's the last level? Have you made it to the last level?
I have made it to the last level one time.
And that's a new thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Again, in the arcade, I never made it past round 2. Now, round 1, you turn into a wolf, which is super cool. Round 2, you turn into a dragon, which is really awesome. Round 3, which was new for me, you turn into a bear.
So, wait a minute. So, you turn into a werewolf, and then a were-dragon.
Yes.
And then a werebear.
Well, they're all altered werebeasts, if you will. And so then 4, you turn into Tony the Tiger with golden orbs of somethingness. And level 5, I believe it's the golden werewolf, but I have not seen personally the golden werewolf yet.
Because you've not gotten there. So you're recommending this game, even though you've never beat this game.
Oh, it's an incredibly hard game, incredibly frustrating, and it's really, you have to discipline yourself to not throw controllers on the ground, especially since
so you like games where you have to discipline yourself, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I really like too, like every time you fight the boss, that Neff says, "Welcome to your doom," because that's just cool. And then after you beat each level, there's this weird little like coin of him doing various and sundry strange things to Athena that are just really weird. And it's just,
there's a lot of like ridiculous strangeness in this.
It's ridiculous. It's strange. It has a dark backdrop, which I really enjoy. It's all kind of steeped loosely in Greek mythology, and it's just really a fun game.
It sort of looks to me, the graphics are a little bit better, but it reminds me of like Golden Axe. It reminds me of, it feels like a very, even though it's not, there's a lot of games that came out in the 80s and 90s that were obviously like D&D based games. Like, they weren't Dungeons and Dragons official, but they're very based, like, you're like a class. You're like, oh, I'm the dwarf class, I'm the mage class, I'm this class. And you can see that a lot. And I think Altered Beast is different from that because it's based on Roman mythology. Yeah. The graphics remind me of some of those games, I think, because of the time. But the play is just so strange to me when you look at, like, even the way you fight is very strange. The way you have to think about conserving life is very strange. It's one of those games you have inability to save, which, of course, is something they don't do now in games they don't think for.
Oh, and there's no such thing as continues on this game. You've got those 5 lives. There's no continues.
And that's it. You're done.
And Golden Axe I love as well, but it's a much more forgiving game. But one thing that is kind of cool, there is actually, it's funny you mentioned that, there is actually a Golden Axe Easter egg in Altered Beast, which is in the second level. You actually fight those little dragons that you ride in Golden Axe, which I thought was super cool.
That is cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm really glad. So this is what, this is our thing. I'm really had a fun time recommending and talking with my husband. Russell, go over what you recommend again, just real briefly.
Sure. I recommended Let's Be Less Stupid by Patricia Marks in the book category. And you recommended...
No, you're going to go down your whole list.
Oh, cool. And the movie was Back in Time by Jason Aaron, the director. and the game was Altered Beast for the Sega Genesis.
And I recommended the Aeronauts Windlass by Jim Butcher, which is the first in the Cinders. I want to say Sire, but no, it's Cinder Spires series.
As in fire.
Yes, Cinder, like in Cinderella, Russ.
Except
there's no Cinderella in there, just to be clear.
Oh, good.
It's not a I want to say fantasy reboot, but it's not a fairy tale reboot. Thank you. My brain kicked in at the end there. I also we both recommended the Back to the Future movie. We recommended the documentary about Back to the Future, but I'll recommend Back to the Future movies 1, 2, and 3. You need to watch them. They're fun. If you haven't watched them yet, watch them. They're just fun. Don't expect them to be like, intellectual, but they're just fun movies.
She definitely recommends the spoof interview with Bob Zemeckis.
Yes,
about the hoverboards.
I mean, if you can I'm sure you can find that on YouTube somewhere. And then I also recommended for the game Gobliiins. You can get Gobliiins on GOG. You can look other places and get it too. The nice thing about the GOG version, first of all, it's licensed, so that's always good. But they already have it hooked up to an emulator that you can play on any computer. And you can also play it, I can't believe it's available on Android, but it is, so you can play it on there too. You can find me basically on YouTube at Jen with Glasses. You can find me on Twitch with Jen with Glasses. If you want to check out what Twitch is, please come to my channel. Definitely, Twitch is a new thing, and so it's very much like the Wild Wild West, if that makes any sense. People are all over the place. Mine is fairly family friendly as far as like you can play it with your kids listening, and I don't think I say anything. Occasionally an 80s game will fool me into saying something like slut, because I'm reading the dialogue between characters, and that happened one time and I'm like, what? Sorry moms that are listening to this while they clean while their kids are around. So that's where you can find me. You can't find Russ anywhere yet.
You can find me, Russ, right here on Book Movie Game.
There you go. This is where you can find him. So thank you so much for listening. We're going to try and keep doing this. I think this is a fun format. If you have any comments about books or movies that you recommend, games that you think go in connection to these, please put them in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Thank you very much. We'll see ya.
Thanks for hanging out.